There's this aspect of the creepy and the macabre that I've always found really interesting, wherein something that isn't intended to be scary is nevertheless terrifying. Like the uncanny valley, where something can resemble a human just enough where we can recognize it as such, but there's just something off about it. This idea of the familiar becoming unfamiliar, the known becoming unknown, is a basic facet of horror as a genre. Sure, you can make a story about something that's already scary in the real world, but what if that scary thing was something traditionally seen as non-threatening, or innocent, or really just not scary? That tired trope of a scary old woman is an easy example of this, because realistically, an old woman is one of the easiest horror monsters to take down. Just tell her what a furry is and she'll flatline in 15 seconds. What I just described, however, was something that isn't traditionally scary being changed to become scary. What I'm more interested in is when this occurs unintentionally, the unscary becoming or being scary by accident. It obviously isn't something you see in horror media, given the nature of the genre and how the audience goes in with the expectation of being scared. So it's kinda hard to pin down, especially with how subjective it is. Kinda like a phobia. Clowns aren't meant to be scary, but some find them terrifying regardless. I have a phobia of needles, and I cry every time I have to get blood drawn. Even though the rational side of my brain knows that everything is okay, the irrational emotional response I have towards needles is just that, an irrational emotional response. There's no logic behind it, no reasonably justifiable explanation. It doesn't really make any sense. I remember how I was flashing a custom firmware update on my PS3 so I could make my slim model play PS2 games because I really wanted to play the PS2 Silent Hill games, and so I had to put my PS3 into recovery mode to install the update from a USB. There was just something about the dead silence during the update process and the more basic UI that genuinely made me turn the volume on my TV all the way down, just in case there was a loud jump scare that would never realistically happen. Like, I had to walk out of the room while it was updating, and I was nervous to walk back in to check if it was finished. It's hard to really explain why it freaks me out so much, given that I don't really get scared from horror in a traditional sense. Horror rarely ever actually scares me, but the PS3's recovery mode, my timbers are positively shivered. I have the same sort of experience every time I have to do something in my PC's BIOS, or whenever I've installed custom firmware for other consoles like the Wii or 3DS. I think whenever the OS of a piece of hardware that you're familiar with is stripped away, and you're confronted with a more bare-bones user interface or lines of code whizzing past during an update process, you're taken out of a comfort zone in a way. Instead of the slick and shiny system menu that was designed to be as intuitive and user-friendly to the average consumer as it possibly could, it's text in a black void, or minimalistic low-res icons. Maybe that's why the system menus for the 6th generation of consoles were so bizarrely horrifying. Hey, it's me, Professor Spooky. What's my PhD? Women's Studies, obviously. Love those guys. Anyways, welcome to my class on a brief history of the 6th generation of game consoles. That's gonna be really fucking hard to say. Sixth. This is for the people who aren't total fucking dweebs and don't already know what I'm talking about. Now, when I'm referring to the 6th generation, what I mean specifically is the group of game consoles released during the late 90s and early 2000s. Those little bastards would be the Sega Dreamcast, the Nintendo GameCube, Microsoft's Xbox, and Sony's PlayStation 2. Let's introduce these 4 eligible bachelors, shall we? First up, in 1998 in Japan and 1999 everywhere else, is the Sega Dreamcast, a complete commercial failure, and the reason why Sega shifted to focusing on game development after being a competitor in the home console market to Nintendo in the 90s. God, it's going to be really hard to do this without going into long tangents. This guy, this pretty white box, is known for titles like Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, Crazy Taxi, Shenmue, Space Channel 5, Choo Choo Rocket, Samba de Amigo, Jet Set Radio, Seaman.
So, are you still in school?
So, weird stuff. The stuff that weird kid you knew in elementary school would enjoy. It's alright, I can make that joke. I was that weird kid. We've got Nintendo's beloved GameCube from 2001, a personal favorite of mine, and also not really that successful financially. It wasn't an outright failure like the Dreamcast, but it underperformed quite a bit behind the remaining 2 bachelors, which sucks a lot. I love this little lunchbox with its goofy handle and its strange-looking controller and its tiny little discs. I fucking adore the GameCube controller so much, by the way. Just felt like I should get that out there. Anyways, this little Minecraft block is most loved for its phenomenal lineup of games, which were also, honestly, pretty weird. Luigi's Mansion, Metroid Prime, Super Mario Sunshine, Mario Kart Double Dash, The Legend of Zelda and the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, Super Monkey Ball, Animal Crossing, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, Kirby Air Ride. I really, really love this little guy. So, to contrast the praise I'm heaping onto the GameCube, here's Microsoft's Xbox, also from 2001. It had Halo, and Halo 2. That's doing it a disservice. It had some heavy hitters, like Fable, Jet Set Radio Future, Psychonauts, Forza, a console port of Morrowind. It didn't really have that many huge console-defining exclusives like the other 6th-gen consoles. There's a ton of hidden gems, like Cell Damage or Blink's the Time Sweeper, and Rare's output was decent after they were bought by Microsoft with Grabbed by the Ghoulies and Conquer Live and Reloaded, but let's be honest, the original Xbox is mostly known for being a Halo machine. You probably weren't buying an Xbox for Grabbed by the Ghoulies, you were buying it for Halo. It has its loyal defenders, as every console does. But yeah, it existed. It's a thing. PlayStation 2. No introduction needed. You know what a PlayStation 2 is. Sony's successor to the PlayStation 1, released in 2000 after the turn of the millennium, PS2. There's too many incredible games to name all of them, but I need to list some anyways for the sake of consistency. I'm a prisoner to the will of the video essay format. Ico and Shadow of the Colossus, Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, Ratchet & Clank, Jak and Daxter, Sly Cooper, Okami, Kingdom Hearts, Gran Turismo 4, Katamari Damacy, Devil May Cry, God of War, Silent Hill 2 and 3. Yeah, good console. That's all. Class dismissed. None of this will be on the final because there is no final. I lied about my PhD. I'm a college dropout. I'm not supposed to be in this classroom. I broke in after hours. The police will be here any minute. So, now that our lovely and totally legit professor has given us all a crash course, let's get to the part you're actually here for. All of the 6th-gen consoles had a similar aesthetic they were trying to go for, influenced heavily by the cultural fascination at the time with humanity entering a bold and exciting new era, the early 2000s. Yeah, it's funny in retrospect, but it made sense at the time. Technology was advancing rapidly as always, but it was starting to become way more prevalent in the lives of those in first-world capitalist societies. The early 2000s was a pre-smartphone era that was, in retrospect, perfectly setting up for the era we're in now in the early 2020s, where technology is so dominant that I'm able to potentially make a career out of talking about stupid shit on the internet. All of this is to say that market trends at the time in which these consoles were being developed showed that target demographics wanted something that was futuristic, and each console had their own take on what that should look like through their system menus. The Dreamcast system menu is unsettling in a way that's different from the others. It's sort of reminiscent of the PS1 in its presentation, but instead of that 90s radical flair with the spray-painted icons and wacky fonts, it's this strange, overly friendly aesthetic with bright colors and an overall soft look. It's hard to find any sharp edges. Almost all of the text boxes and square icons have rounded corners. The icons in the main menu dance and squish around. The background has a pool of water beneath a cloudy blue sky. There's no ambient background music, so the only sounds you hear are the sound effects from moving around the menus. The sound effects themselves just feel late 90s in a way I can't adequately describe. This system menu doesn't creep me out as much as the others, but I can't deny this feeling of discomfort that it gives me. It just feels too friendly in a way that makes it seem like there's something else beneath the surface that it doesn't want you to see. The pure silence only being broken by these spacey sound effects has to be a part of it, or maybe I'm overthinking it. Wouldn't be the first time. Although, it's clear that the Dreamcast is going for a dream-like and heavenly vibe, given the name of the console. So, if the Dreamcast is heaven, the GameCube is purgatory. Trust me, it's kinda scary. Sorta. It was way scarier when I was a kid, at least. That bit after the animation we're all familiar with, that odd, discordant rendition of the intro spinning into a transparent cube floating in the void. I might have just been a little bitch as a kid. Not like anything has changed since then. But yeah, this was so much scarier when I was a kid. It made me uncomfortable. It kinda put me on edge. It just didn't feel right. That's a running through line with all of these system menus. None of them were explicitly horrifying, although more on that later, but they just felt off. They didn't feel right. They tapped into that part of every little kid's brain that's scared of sleeping without a nightlight, or having your closet open at night, or a shadow being cast by something outside of your bedroom window. It's natural to be afraid of the dark. You don't know what's in it. Sure, you can comfort yourself by trying to reason that there's nothing there, and you're just being silly, but how can you be so certain? So confident in that assumption? You don't really know. You're just making what you believe to be a safe guess and treating it as fact. What if you're wrong? What if you're unaware of some threat lurking in the darkness because you've convinced yourself of your own safety? I have the knowledge, the certainty, that in all of the motherboard BIOS screens I've come through, and custom firmware installation screens I've been too afraid to watch, there was never anything there to truly be afraid of. Nobody took the time to include a random jump scare for the sake of it. No loud sound to justify my muting of the TV during the installation process. There isn't any justification for the discomfort and uneasiness I feel from these things, from the system menus of old game consoles from the early 2000s. That doesn't mean I can't still feel that way. Anyways, yeah, I went on that long tangent because, truthfully, there isn't that much to talk about for these first two consoles. What you see here is what you get. A cube in the abyss. Truly riveting stuff. Hey, the sound design is kinda quirky though. There's that Easter egg of the ambiance being a slowed rendition of the Famicom Disk System startup. And everything is made of cubes. That's cute. Animated save icons on the memory card screen, funky sound effects for screen transitions and selecting stuff. It's cool. Even when trying to match the aesthetics of other consoles at the time, Nintendo had to put their own flair into it. Quick recap for the 6th gen console lore so far. Dreamcast is heaven, GameCube is purgatory, so the Xbox is hell, right? Something like that. Yeah, look at this shit. It's fucking cool, right? Out of all of these consoles, the original Xbox's dashboard very obviously leaned the most into that futuristic aesthetic. And I'm just gonna get it out of the way early. Yeah, it is very, like, Matrix-ish. It's kinda hard to see something trying to be futuristic with predominant use of black and green without being reminiscent of The Matrix. I mean, I haven't seen any of the Matrix films, but I'm pretty sure we all just know what the aesthetic is like through cultural osmosis. Anyways, the menu. I'm, gonna let it speak for itself for a bit. I love the way each screen is like a separate sphere or node within this larger network, and combined with how the startup presents itself, it feels like we're supposed to imagine this menu taking place within the console. Everything feels connected. No matter where you are, everyone is connected. The legend for the face buttons at the bottom has wires running into each of them. The language selection screen has some strange sounds when you navigate to it. The screen for connecting to Xbox Live seems to sum up what it feels like the console was going for. Welcome to the future of gaming. 2 decades later, I can't really say they were wrong. The sound design for navigating each screen and the transitions between them, the deep droning ambience in the background, everything comes together to create the... Yeah, no, that's great, that's cool, that's awesome, love that, yep, totally, what the fuck, man, what? For whatever reason, it was decided that in supposedly trying to go for an alien or out-of-this-world aesthetic, a few freaky sounds were included to play in the background that were, quote, public domain audio from NASA transmissions from the Apollo days, that were tweaked to sound terrifying, I guess. It sounds less like something alien and otherworldly, and more like the Xbox is gaining sentience and attempting to break free from its own green-tinted prison. Just for the fun of it, here's those various sounds isolated. So the Dreamcast is heaven, the GameCube is purgatory, the Xbox is, well, I don't know if it's hell necessarily, but I wouldn't be the one to argue that it isn't. That only leaves the PlayStation 2, and it's honestly a different beast entirely. It feels beyond description, so obviously I'm going to do my best to describe it in detail. If you never owned a PS2 years ago like I did, or you're too young to have ever seen this intro firsthand, just watching a video of it online doesn't really have the same impact as sitting in front of a huge CRT TV and pressing the power button on a PlayStation 2, only to be greeted by this. It's overwhelming. It's suffocating. You can feel the sound of the PS2's startup taking the air out of your lungs. Just the sound of it is so jarring and all-encompassing. You can feel it all around yourself, surrounding you and tightening its grip around your chest. It reminds me of this phenomenon with a tiger's roar, where tigers can supposedly produce a sound with their roar that's at such a low frequency that you can physically feel it just as much as you can hear it, and the surprise of it can have a paralyzing effect with how it reverberates within you. There's this brief bit at the beginning of the startup that sounds like an inhale, like some colossal beast drawing air into its lungs before, roaring with the same sound as someone getting pushed into a pipe organ. It makes me think of how different of an experience Shadow of the Colossus would be if every Colossus cries of pain were the PS2 startup. All of this talk about the audio, and I haven't even addressed the visuals. The perspective of floating far above this endless abyss, which may be populated with these monochromatic towers representing the save data on your memory card. The wisps with the same colors as the DualShock 2's face buttons, and just some random transparent cubes floating alongside you. The view of the abyss rotating before descending into darkness, wherein you'll be greeted by one of a few screens. Let's start with what you'll see without a disc inserted. It's an extremely simple system menu, with the bare essentials and nothing more. You can either browse through your memory card's saves or mess with the system settings. That's it. Remaining on the screen treats you with a lovely animation and an ambience that I haven't seen replicated by any home console before or since. It's easy to close your eyes and imagine yourself somewhere different. It personally makes me imagine sitting by the shoreline of the beach at night, the waves crashing in front of me, a cloudy sky overhead, and a storm looming in the distance. I'm not too worried, but I'm still hoping the flashes of lightning and distant thunder remain far away. I can feel my toes curling and drawing sand in the spaces between them, the wind blowing through my hair and leaving goosebumps on my arms, the sea spray from the waves before me being carried by the wind and chilling my exposed skin. It's cold, as the sun has long since set in the horizon in front of me, and my knees are held close to my chest to keep myself warm. I'm alone, even though I wish I could share this moment, this atmosphere, this feeling with someone else. Another soul to sit alongside me and watch the waves crashing endlessly on this cold and empty shore. That's how it feels for me, at least. I can also imagine laying in bed in the dark, a box fan running in the window to draw in the night air, the distant sound of a parent or a sibling's noise machine playing white noise to help them sleep, the occasional passing vehicle on the road outside, their headlights illuminating the room through the blinds on the window, the wind outside shaking those large trees in the yard, the sound of rustling leaves and creaking branches, the ambience of a calm and typical night where all you care about is just falling asleep. Or you can open your eyes and see these glowing blue wisps dancing together in the void, all following the same path, but each moving at their own tempos. They'll dance like that forever, Or at least until you select an option or reset the console. If you do happen to have a PS2 disc inserted, you'll be greeted with the same initial startup, and then a neat logo. If you have a PS1 disc inserted, you'll get the latter half of the original PS1 startup animation. So, what happens if you're unfortunate enough to insert a disc that the PS2 cannot read? Well, it's not fun. It's really not fun. I don't like it. This screen is lovingly referred to as the red screen of death. And, I can't really argue with that name. It's as if you're falling endlessly, perpetually descending into hell. Or maybe this is hell. I wouldn't be surprised if this is what you see whenever you die. When you tell a dying person, don't go into the light, it's this red glow in the center of the foggy mist that you're referring to. It doesn't help that the ambience of the screen with the dancing blue wisps is reused here, recontextualizing the calming white noise and making it ominous and terrifying. It sounds like the wind rushing past you as you're falling into the red glow of this abyss, never to hit the ground. Yeah, imagine being a little kid in the late 2000s like I was, sitting alone in a dark living room at night to sneakily play my scratched Atari anthology disc past my bedtime without my parents' permission, only to be met with trauma. Honestly, I think this exact screen, or really just the entire PS2 system menu, is exactly why I'm so irrationally afraid of empty black screens. I was a constantly anxious little kid who grew up to be a constantly anxious young adult, traumatized by the system menu of one of her childhood game consoles to the point where she doesn't even like to be in the same room as a TV that isn't powered on. Okay, well, I've gotten better with that last part, but I did sleep facing the wall away from the TV in my bedroom when I was a teenager, just because the empty black screen made me that uncomfortable. Honestly, even now, I'll easily be able to freak myself out if I stare at a dark screen for long enough. I just don't like it. The same girl who laughs while watching horror movies or playing scary games is terrified of unpowered displays. I'm a fickle bitch. Okay, I also wanted to include this little bit of info because I don't know if I'll ever get another opportunity to in the future. Treat this as a bonus entry for a 5th-gen console with some, creepy, scary, the PS1, my beloved, wonderful little thing. Very, very iconic intro. There's nothing really too scary about it. Maybe the black void the logo is sitting in is kinda creepy, but the GameCube had the same. For some context, the intro for the PS1 is composed of 3 separate sound files that are simply played at different speeds. Well, in some instances, if you insert a disc the PS1 can't read, the startup we're all familiar with will become corrupted, and after the initial sounds and a few seconds of silence, you'll encounter what's been dubbed online as fearful harmony. Pretty cool, right? Yeah, my stomach dropped when I first heard it too. You want to know the best part? That's not even the only corrupted intro the PS1 has. Similarly to Fearful Harmony, in some cases when you insert an unreadable disc or the PS1's BIOS has been corrupted, you'll be met with personified fear. Kind of a melodramatic name, but I don't know, it's kinda creepy. So, what's the point of all of this? Usually my videos have some big thesis statement at the end about some larger, deeper meaning that can be drawn from whatever I'm talking about, like analog horror and creative integrity. Or my big Halloween video being fuck you, I like the things I like just because I do, I'm a freak and you can't ever change me, that sort of thing. Well, I don't really know if there's much of a deeper meaning here. I honestly just wanted an excuse to talk about the PS2 system menu, and it's kinda hard to stretch that out into a decently sized video, until I remembered, oh right, yeah, the other 6th gen consoles are kinda funky too. But maybe that's the point? I ultimately don't really need an excuse to make a video on the PS2 system menu. If I wanted to, I could make a shorter video on just that and nothing else. I kinda have a problem with how I'm always constantly analyzing every little detail of the media I consume. I don't struggle with being unable to turn my brain off and just enjoy something for what's directly shown to the audience, but most of the time I don't really want to. I love analyzing media. That's what this entire channel is based around. I just often feel like I'm over-explaining things in my videos, pointing out stuff that's obvious and not adding anything to the discussion. Of course, I know that's kind of what I'm supposed to do, given that I need to provide context for those unfamiliar with whatever I'm talking about, but I'm just afraid I'm not really doing anything significant. I'm not doing anything that's worth engaging with. Is this a justified fear? I mean, maybe. I think I know deep down, though, that it isn't. It's an irrational fear, based off of nothing but my own insecurity. I mean, you cared enough to watch or listen to this video up to this point. Clearly I'm doing something right. At least I hope. We've all got irrational fears like that. I've expressed a few of mine throughout this video. Needles, my insignificance as a person, dark TV screens, the usual. I'm sure that even if you don't share the same fears that I have, you can at least empathize with them and understand why I have them or how it feels to be confronted with them. I can do the same with whatever fears you have, however irrational or silly they may seem. Just because a fear is irrational doesn't mean it's any less terrifying than a more easily justifiable fear. You just gotta respect whenever someone is afraid of something. We're all afraid of something.